This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's up, gang? Welcome to another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Andrew Paterson, Michael Remis with you. Packed show coming off an interesting win for the Winnipeg Jets last night over the Arizona Coyotes. Bottom line, got the 2 points that was desperately needed. But a lot to pick apart coming out of last night's game, to say the least. We're going to do that with Frankie Corrado from TSN Hockey. We'll also have Brandon Rewucki jump on the program. And with the Flames winning last night and getting down to the final 10 games of the regular season, we'll also check in on the Calgary Flames, who are chasing the Winnipeg Jets, with my pal Pat Steinberg from Sportsnet 960 coming up a little later on. We'll also hear from Rick Bowness, a little bit from practice today before the Jets head out to Anaheim to begin a very important road trip out to the West Coast. Just before we get Remis in here, welcome to everyone with this live on YouTube. Make sure to hit that red subscribe button if you haven't already. And don't forget, Winnipeg Sports Talk is available wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Just pop in Winnipeg Sports Talk and make sure you subscribe to the audio feed, which is available Monday to Friday in and around 3:30, just in time for your ride home. And big thanks to the sponsors that make this happen. Before we get Remo in here: Princess Auto, Coolbet Canada, Royal Sports, Boston Pizza, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Manitoba Battery, F Apparel, Wallace & Wallace, Consolidated Supply, Vita Health Fresh Market, Culligan Water, Canadian Club, and of course our friends over at Little Brown Jug. Don't forget, a week today, in fact, Wednesday, March 29th, we'll be doing another Winnipeg Sports Talk Sports Trivia Night. Check the link in the description, or go to our socials or Little Brown Jug socials. Reserve your tickets right now. Seating is limited. Hope to see all of you there. Let's get Remis in here to start it off. Well, Reem, they say, it was all about getting 2 points, and the team did that, but that was about the least confidence-inspiring victory I think we could have possibly seen from the Winnipeg Jets. That being said, they did, hold things down in the third period. Brilliant game by Connor Hellebuck, and I guess you can't complain too much when you get the win, but there's a lot to unpack from that one last night, considering the current predicament of the Jets. What's going on?
Hey, yeah, we've been kind of dumping all over them since that game against St. Louis, so it is appropriate to give them some applause, praise them for getting the 2 points. The process part of it, maybe not the way you'd want to draw it up. I think someone in chat said they played well for 2/3 of the game, that being the first and third period. It was, look, we talked all, the last couple days. They don't score first. 5 games in a row they didn't score first, and a lot of those times coming in the first 6 minutes. Well, it was the Jets scoring early yesterday, and Nikolai Ehlers, who's quietly he's been a point-per-game player here over the last 9 games. He gets on a breakaway and puts the Jets up, and that was kind of, I don't want to say that was it, but I think they're able to relax a little and play with a lead, in the first period for the first time in a number of games. So I think that was huge for them. And special teams, well, with the man short, not with the man advantage, getting them. And Adam Lowry now was at 2 in 3 games after scoring his first in 41 or 43 on Saturday. So nice to see him get on the board with Morgan Barron, who I think's looked good over the last stretch here. So there were definitely some positives, but that second period, man, wasn't what you want to see from a desperate team.
How does that happen? You're exactly right. The first period, there was a lot to build on, I think. Nikolai Ehlers, we talked about Ehlers, the the spunk that he showed and standing up for himself and his team going up against Braden Shen in a complete mismatch of a fight on Sunday, I think showed that he cares, he's involved. And listen, he took advantage of a gaffe on the Coyotes side of things, went in, took it to the net, didn't score on his first attempt, but banged in the rebound, got the team the lead. And, you would think at that point that was exactly what the Winnipeg Jets needed. And then later on, and we'll get to Morgan Barron in a minute, who played a team low, just over 5 minutes of ice time last night. I thought he was really effective when he was on the ice. He gets a beautiful, I know Neil Pionk's been much maligned for, some puck handling issues and mistakes and turnovers. Neil Pionk made a gorgeous air pass, basically from about the own dot in their own zone to close to the other blue line to spring Barron and Lowry on a shorthanded 2-on-1. Beautiful, beautiful setup by Morgan Barron. And there was Adam Lowry again, looking like a bit of a sniper, popping one past Vimilka, and it was 2-0. And, we got to the first intermission. There was, I think some better feelings amongst Jet fans, at least the ones that were at the building last night that I was talking to. Well, 20 minutes later, after the second period, any positive vibes had pretty much evaporated, despite the fact that the team was still up 2-1, because they were absolutely caved in for the majority of that second period and went over 16 minutes without registering a shot on goal. And as we'll hear from Rick Bowness, it was hard to believe, to be honest with you, Reem. Rick Bowness did make some changes, one that I think, frankly, were quite overdue. Swapping the centers and moving Dubois up with Connor and moving, if you want to say it, moving down Mark Scheifele along with Nikolai Ehlers. I mean, the Scheifele-Connor pairing had just essentially turned into a black hole for the Winnipeg Jets. And I was kind of surprised they started that way to begin with yesterday. They could not continue going through that game. And obviously the team was better in the third period, but to be honest, they were the benefactors of 4 power plays, 8 minutes of power play time. And stop me if you've heard this one before. The power plays were helpful, if only to drain the clock with the Coyotes team that was just 1 goal behind, because once again, nothing going on with the man advantage. I know they're practicing that today at practice before leaving. But they did hold the puck a lot better. They did control the flow of the game a lot better in the third period. And I'll say this, Remo. Thank God Rick Bowness started Connor Hellebuck yesterday, because he, especially in that second period, put a team on his back, kept them in the game, was a very deserving first star of the hockey game last night. And he was a difference maker, stepped up when his team needed it. But we were hoping to see more from some of the top players and the leaders, specifically that top line. We didn't get it last night. The power play is still in a funk as bad as any I can remember. But at least they got the 2 points as they get out onto the road.
Yeah, I'm reading the chat here. One comment, I forget who wrote it, said the 2 points were the best part of the game. And Running Man wrote that, that game kind of summed up the Jets season, where you have this amazing first period where you look like you're in control, you get a nice lead, and then in the second period, kind of just, stop playing and let them, Hellebuck didn't let them get back into it, but you go, the final 16 minutes without a shot. It kind of reminds you of the great first half of the Jets season and this slide that we're on here into the second half. So you want to be excited that they win, because they needed to win with Calgary winning yesterday and Nashville winning, but just the way that they got there doesn't really give you a lot of confidence. And you mentioned that the power play 0 for 6. That's 1 for 21 in the last 6 games, 3 for 33 in the last 9. Showed it to Jeff Hamilton for including these notes in his post-game report through the Winnipeg Free Press. And here are the goalless streaks. It's amazing they're even winning with the goalless streaks here from their top players. And I mentioned Nikolai Ehlers. You look at his last 9 games. Again, we were talking about him. How's he doing from his sports hernia surgery? He really, hasn't looked like himself. Well, since the San Jose game, he got 9 points in 9 games, 4 goals, 5 assists. That's more than what, like Scheifele, Connor, Wheeler, Dubois combined. Connor hasn't scored in his last 11. Dubois his last 7. Now he's been injured for part of those. Wheeler last 18, and Scheifele last 6. Like, how can this team win games when 4 of your top forwards aren't scoring? And your power play keeps getting handed these gifted, extended power plays, and they can't even generate anything. So I think it's definitely concerning. But hey, they got the 2 points and they're in a playoff spot, right?
Jason Eastwood in chat makes an interesting comment. And I'm not sure how much of this you could have seen on the television, but being in the building last night, I completely agree with this comment. I found the Jets' body language and spirit extremely troubling last night. They don't seem to have any will. And listen, there was a number of players that were working really hard last night, and I think, especially in that third period, some of the the rank and file players, certainly that third line, played well, was engaged into it, and was able to sort of steady the ship right now. But, as long as the top players on this team are in the funk that they are, starting off with 55, Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor as well, it's going to take incredible games from the likes of Connor Hellebuck and things like a shorthanded goal to put the team over the top and get 2 points. And, as I said, we're going to talk with Pat Steinberg a little later on. Calgary won last night. Nashville won last night. So that 2 points was imperative in just maintaining the lead that they have right now, Reem. But as we'll hear from a minute from Rick Bowness, and I'm sure from what we're getting from reports from practice today, it's very clear that performances like last night are not going to cut it. Even when you're playing against some of the quote-unquote bottom feeder teams in the NHL, I was quite impressed with the Coyotes. I mean, especially, the situation they're in to go down 2-0 or, after the first period. That's a game that a lot of teams that are destined for the golf course sort of mail it in. If you had watched just the second period, if you were late to the game and couldn't see the scoreboard, you would not have thought that it's the Winnipeg Jets that were the team that, right now is in control of their own destiny and heading to the playoffs. But it was absolutely confounding. And as we're going to talk with Frankie Corrado coming up in a little bit, really looking forward to his perspective on all of this. That's a game, honestly, that maybe created more questions or amplified the questions around the club as opposed to made any statements or answers about where the team is and the fact that they can get this back on the rails and compete once we get to the playoffs after potentially booking a ticket to the Stanley Cup tourney.
Yeah, you'd like to think that they can figure this out eventually, but I did enjoy Jeff Hamilton's comment earlier this week that he's like, flip a switch. You need to, flip a lighthouse to get these guys going, which was, if you missed it, check out Jeff's appearance on Monday. But, we talk about bottom feeders. I mean, kind of like the Jets are a bit of a bottom feeder in the league since January 17, which we've determined is the point was the game against Montreal where it's kind of gone downhill there.
Where Leibel cursed the team, yeah.
That was the moment where Leibel came on and cursed the team. Exactly. They're 26th in the league in terms of points per game here. And so Arizona has been much better than them. And Anaheim, who they're playing too, has also been better than them. So I know the Jets' hot start is kind of just picking up their overall standings, but in the last 2 months now, Chicago has a better record than them.
You mean the teams that are trying to lose?
Yeah, Detroit, Anaheim. It's insane to think about that and think of how it's just so puzzling that how good this team looked for 2 months and now how they look. And we're all sitting here trying to figure this out, what happened. And this isn't the first time. This happened to us in 2018-19 season where they were in first place. And, you thought they were going to get a division title and they didn't. And, lost to the Blues in 6 games and completely no-showed in game 6. And we've been trying to figure out this team ever since then. So, I mean, it was a good win. I mean, nice for the home crowd to go because they hadn't won a lot at home lately after getting off to that hot start. But, that you'd like to celebrate a power play goal. I mean, I enjoyed a comment in the Kenny and Rennie chat. The penalty kill has more goals than the power play lately. And they did score that one shorthanded, and they had another one, I think, a couple games ago, too.
in the third period when they were getting, I don't know, maybe it was they'd had the first power play and then the double minor. During the double minor, you could just hear people, at least in my section, going, at this point, maybe they just start declining these penalties because, now obviously that was tongue in cheek. That time on the power play was important, if nothing else, to, spend a little bit of more time with the puck on their stick, which didn't happen a lot in the second period, and bleed the clock when it came to just getting closer to the finish line. But as I say, we'll talk about the power play coming up with Rewucki and with Frankie Corrado, because it continues to be something that not only isn't helping the team, but you could make an argument is really, really setting the team back. Another performance last night with, I believe, 8 shots over 6 power plays, just simply not good enough, and absolutely puzzling when you think about the talent that Rick Bowness has at hand to throw out with the man advantage, as to how it's not more dangerous whether the puck is going in or not. We talked about Ehlers Remo. I thought he had moments last night, and I thought he really brought it. We were asking about which of the players were going to step up last night. And I was going over the ice time of the game. And, obviously there were some tweaks. Mark Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois switching lines later on. But it's almost criminal that Morgan Barron only ended up playing 5 minutes in that game last night. 113 on the shorthanded and 359 even strength. Made a beautiful play to Adam Lowry. Got into his first fight in the National Hockey League. And I do wonder at what point, Rick Bowness just begins to play other lines more, lines that are at least competing at the level that he's asking them to do. I guess we'll see what happens coming up against the Ducks on Thursday night. But as I say, you had to have it last night, and they did. And to me, the one guy, for all the body language comments that we're getting and that are concerning to people, and I hear every bit of it, the one guy who had great body language last night, who was confident and did exactly what his team needed to do, was the backbone of this team, Connor Hellebuyck. And he held them in that second period. He made some circus saves, and one save in particular, Reem, that we'll be talking about for a long time. I still cannot believe that he was able to get his paddle down and save what would be a sure goal, in a lot of ways a game-saving goal, and one that will be live forever on highlight reels after basically a David Copperfield Houdini act by Hellebuyck last night.
Yeah, and I see people here saying that, I think it was Big Guy said or Jay Miller, I'm not sure which one, but said it was a luck save. I mean, it was luck that the shooter shot it right into his stick, but Hellebuyck, he slides out of the net. He knows exactly where he is, and he just very calmly lays his paddle. Lays his paddle down on the goal line, and the guy shoots it right into his stick. Maybe if he tried to raise it, Hellebuyck's pretty, smart goalie, good reflexes, good hand-eye, where he probably could have raised the paddle to, try to baseball bat it out of the air. But that save, and he's been making saves like that all year when, they make errors, and we talk about, other team getting grade A's, and he's there stopping them. So, that was a first-star performance, stopping 29 of 30. And you have to wonder, is he just going to play the rest of the year now? And can they afford to have him not play? And you mentioned Morgan Barron. Yeah,
they don't win that game if Hellebuyck's not in the net last night. It's pretty simple. And I mentioned this before, Reem. Rick Bowness has said, we are in the playoffs right now. These are playoff games. Well, if they're playoff games, you got to put your number one guy in there until you have clinched a spot in the playoffs, and that's going to be a little while. But as we mentioned, I think the schedule, very, very kind to the Winnipeg Jets over the next little while with the amount of rest in between games. So, as I said yesterday, I predicted on the show, I don't think we're seeing Dave until some point in April.
Yeah, I think you might be right. And here's Morgan Barron. Last night you said 518. That's a season low for him, 8 shifts. And you look at his finals. I said he's been on a pretty good run here since that second game against Edmonton where he had a goal and assist. He had that breakaway goal. He's got, I think it's 10 games, and he's got 5 points. in 10 games. And he's got, with all that little ice time, has, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points. He's a +2. I mean, those are better numbers. He's got more goals than in his last 9 games than all those other top guys in the top.
And
six
Peg
combined.
City Don with a great comment in chat. Barron earned the jacket after the game and played 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes about what did and didn't happen last night. I mean, Hellebuck and Barron were the guys last night. Running man, Helly plays every game now. Yeah, I'm pretty much with you at it. By the way, let's just get to a why not question of the day, because I'm very, very interested in feedback from Jets fans as to how you walk away from that game last night. Because, as I said, this is a results business right now. They are in a situation where there's no style points, and they probably didn't get any for a good portion of that game last night, but they got the win. But how are you feeling as this team gets onto the road after getting a very important 2 in the fashion that they did? Hit us up in the comments here on YouTube. And if you're listening to the podcast later on, hit us up on Twitter at Sports Talk WPG. Let's hear a little bit from Rick Bowness and some of the fellas after the game. We'll do that in just a second. Got to give a shout out to our friends over at Manitoba Battery. Gang, spring's just around the corner, but if you're in the need of a battery for your car, your truck, or even that summer toy you're looking forward to working on, Manitoba Battery is the most convenient and well-priced option in the city. The one place where you can put in an order for the battery at lunchtime or around the start of Winnipeg Sports Talk and have it sitting on your doorstep in 2 to 4 hours for less money than you'd spend anywhere else in Winnipeg on the same battery. No more fighting for a parking spot at Costco or waiting in line at Canadian Tire. No more spending money on a battery at a big box stores. Shop local and let Manitoba Battery bring the battery to you at the best price in town while you spend time on more important things. 783-8787 is the number if you want to hit them up on the horn. You can also order online at manitobabattery.com. You can always pop by and see Donnie and his great staff at 1026 Logan Avenue. Our friends at Consolidated Supply are ready for this snow to melt. Of course, Consolidated Supply, the irrigation and artificial turf leaders in the province, dealing with the entire golf industry, but they can also do those same great things for your property that they do for beautiful courses around Manitoba. Irrigation options and solutions for you. And heck, if you do have a need for artificial turf, maybe that dream putting green in the backyard, Joe and the guys at down at Consolidated Supply can hook you up. And while you're thinking about that backyard, consider maybe a new spa or hot tub, or how about a beautiful outdoor kitchen? They've got tons of options there, which you really have to see for yourself. You can pop down and check them out at 1395 Niagara Road East, or find out more on their newly relaunched website at cte.ca. Big shout out to our friends at Consolidated Supply. And don't forget, gang, we've still got another week or so left of March. Entries open for the Wallace & Wallace Unsung Hero of the Community. Let us know about that person in your life or in your area that is helping the lives of others through devoting their time through charity and volunteering, or maybe just being that go-to person for everybody on the block when people are in need. Send us an email, unsunghero@winnipegsportstalk.com. The Unsung Hero for the month is going to get an autographed Josh Morrissey jersey, and Wallace & Wallace will make a $500 donation to the Dream Factory in the name of the WST listener who nominated the Unsung Hero. And even better, Josh and Margot Morrissey are going to match that as well. Again, the email, unsunghero@winnipegsportstalk.com. Let us have your nominations. And just before we get to Bones from last night, folks, if you're looking for great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, and Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products too, you got to get down to one of 7 Vita Health Fresh Market stores or online at myvita.ca. Fellas, spring is just around the corner. Get ready for it with Ultimate Male Energy. Formulated specifically for men over 35, Ultimate Male Energy is designed to help improve testosterone production, reduce excess body fat, build muscle tissue, maintain prostate health, and more. It's on sale today at Vita Health. And if you can't make it down to one of the Vita Health stores, visit their website to buy online. Local delivery now available. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at myvita.ca. All right, let's hear from head coach Rick Bowness from last night. His team got the win, but as we mentioned, a lot to be concerned about with the way that the game went, despite the bottom line was getting the 2 points. Here's what Bones had to say about getting a good start last night and for only the second time in 10 games scoring the first goal.
Listen, we had a good start in St. Louis. We did. I mean, we've had good starts. The puck hasn't gone in for us early, and it always ends up in the back of our net as soon as we make a mistake. So, like, we went through this earlier in the year, then we went through a stretch where we got the first goal. That's hockey. We'll play through it.
I think you've actually scored first more often than you haven't, but that streak is just, I guess, one of those things.
It's one of those things. Again, where if we came out of the start of every period and we were slow and that hasn't been the case at all. We've had good starts. We just haven't scored on those starts. And even in Nashville, we were all over them, and they come down and score. So you play your way through it.
All right, so there's Rick Bowness talking a little bit about the good of the game, and that was getting on the scoreboard first with that great rebound goal off of his own breakaway by Nikolai Ehlers. That was the good. The bad then came in the second period, and Bones tried to get into what happened to his club in the second period, getting outshot 18-3 and really relying on their goaltender to prevent them from giving up even more.
We stopped attacking. We got soft with the puck, and they were fighting to get back in the game. We got hemmed in our zone a couple of shifts, which took all the steam out of our game. But when that happens, somebody's got to get it and ice the puck and reset. And we weren't even able to get it. So we had a couple of bad shifts in the second period. We didn't spend any time in their zone because when we were changing, we just had no flow of the game whatsoever.
Is that what led to the shuffling? You mixed up your top six heading into the third?
Yep.
The improvement was there, but did you get enough out of that? Will you go back to it?
We'll see.
Nice. Patented "we'll see" from Rick Bowness on the swapping of the centers and moving Dubois back with Connor. Now, those changes did bear some fruit. Certainly not on the scoreboard, but I think the Winnipeg Jets far more in control of the third period than they certainly were in the second. Bones discussed on coming back in the third and what he thought about the final frame as his team held on for the win.
Funny, the second period, the bench was really, it got quiet because they could see what was going on. Third period, there was a lot of energy on the bench, and that took itself out on the ice, and we had everyone going, but the bench was really energized in the third period. They knew what was at stake. They knew we had to find a way to win this game, but that's 3 games with that team, and they're all 2-1. So maybe they're a whole lot better team than people realize, which they are. They move the puck really well. There's a 4-man rush every time. They're hard to play against, and sometimes you give the opposition some credit and give them credit for the second period. But again, that third period, we played the right way. We did all the little things necessary. We controlled the pace of the game. We played on our toes. Much harder team to play against. We were pressuring them all over the ice, and that's Winnipeg Jet hockey.
All right, so there's Bones from the game last night after the Jets beat the Coyotes 2-1. And Remo, that last clip I found really interesting, talking about how quiet the bench was. And he's mentioned this on a few occasions this year. And dating back to early on, after he'd missed a number of those first games and getting back onto the bench, just how quiet it was. And I mean, this is a time where you need passion, you need emotion, and I can sort of understand why it was quiet. I think the guys were sort of wondering what the hell was going on. But to the credit of a number of players on the team, they were able to ramp that up in the third period and really did steady themselves after Connor Hellebuck just kept them in that game and just basically refused to allow the Coyotes to tie it up.
Yeah, and that's kind of who they've been. They are the team with the best goalie, and Hellebuck, I mean, he stood on his, I don't know if he necessarily stood on his head like he has, but he was excellent last night, and you hope that they can have play a full 60 minutes here on Thursday against Anaheim, but it seems to be a bit of a challenge here. So look, they played great in the first and showed you what they're capable of, but I did enjoy the comment from Running Man who said it was kind of summed up their whole season. And just on the power play, since that January 17th date where Leibel put the curse on the Jets, they are 26th in the league on the power play, 14.3%. So, I mean, this is a stretch here of 2 months of, bottom of the league.
They'd kill for 14% right now. They would kill for 14% right now. It's like 2 or 3% over the course of the last
3 out of 33 in the last 9. What is that?
Okay, so that's 9. That's 9%.
Yeah,
I guess.
Oh, that's some quick math, bro.
Hey, that's one of my specialties. One of my specialties.
Calculating percentages.
But let's hear from Josh Morrissey. Morrissey was in. And we should also get to Kyle Capobianco, who came in last night. I thought played very, very well. We'll talk about that maybe in a little bit with Brandon. But Morrissey spoke after the game and gave his thoughts on just what happened to the Jets in that second frame.
Just staying with it. Obviously, they've been playing well lately, and they've got a lot of skill, and specifically a couple lines that will make plays. And like I said, they're playing well. So they kind of took it to us. We had some huge saves, and we responded well in the third.
What's said there in the dressing room after that second period?
We got to get going back on our toes. We want a replay of the first period, not the second. So I thought we did that, and drew some penalties, moving our feet and winning puck battles, and that was able to put the game away.
Well, and Josh Morrissey, one of the true leaders on this hockey club, mentioning that they liked the first a lot better than the second period. He did expand a little bit more on just the structure that changed from period to period last night.
Yeah, I think we were just on our toes and a lot more aggressive in skating. I thought in the second we just kind of sagged back, and we were kind of creating too many one-on-one battles all over the ice and not winning them. So that's kind of the tale of 2 periods. First we were, second we weren't, and I thought we got back to it again in the third.
Is that an X's and O's thing? Did you guys change anything you were doing, or just get to what you should have been doing?
I think sometimes when you play these teams, people just think, you're going to play Arizona. They're where they're at in the standings, and doing what they're doing trade-wise and all that stuff. But they've got a lot of good players, and they're playing free and playing hard, and so there's going to be momentum swings in the game. I think it's just getting back to our identity and not worrying about who we're playing, but being aggressive on our toes, and just quicker to lose pucks, quicker to battles, to outman them, and I thought we did a good job in the third.
All right, so there's Josh Morrissey, the Winnipeg Jets, with some frank honesty about some of the good and the bad from last night's game. Now, we mentioned body language. The one guy that had great body language last night was Hellebuck. I mentioned just how confident he looked, and he was in God mode, as I think Phyllis mentioned in chat, for a good portion of that game last night, and just simply would not allow his team to lose that hockey game last night. Hellebuck got a jacket last night along with Morgan Barron, and he sat down with Sarah Orlesky afterwards. And first of all, speaking of body language, a very well-deserved first-star performance. And Helly was fist-pumping at the end of the game, and then came out for one of his patented first-star celebrations. So he certainly was in good spirits. But I just want to play this one clip from his post-game conversation with Sarah on the Jets post-game show on what was said in between the second and third period in the Jets room. Listen to this.
Yeah, I think we were just on our.
Sorry, dragging and dropping. I got a sticky mouse.
Yeah, some tough things were said. It just guys know that we need to bring it, and I think that's exactly what we did. We responded well, and like I've always said, we got great character in the room, and I think it showed tonight.
Yeah, so some things that needed to be said, some tough things that needed to be said, and to their credit, they were a much better hockey club in the third period. Although with 8 minutes on the power play, just could not put that one away and had to sweat it out right through till the final buzzer. We're going to have Brandon Rewucki jump on with us in a few minutes to talk about the game last night, but we do have Frankie Corrado coming up right now. I do want to give a big shout out to our friends at Royal Sports. Lots going on as we get closer to spring right now at Royal. Some great savings on a number of parts of the hockey department, including Warrior sticks, I believe, up to 50% off right now if you need a new twig. Of course, snowboards, boots, bindings, just in time for any spring break trips you might have going on. And listen, for the fan in the household, completely covered with the best selection of Winnipeg Jets, Winnipeg Blue Bombers, NFL, NHL, NBA, Major League Baseball, World Soccer, and more. Everything waiting for you at the Royal Sports Superstore, 750 Pembina Highway, along with King Skate, Snow, and Surf. Make sure to follow them on Instagram as well at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. Guys, as you're getting ready for spring and summer, how's the wardrobe looking? If you need an up in your menswear game, a trip down to F Apparel is definitely needed. You got to get down there to 190 Smith Street and check out everything that they have going on, including custom suits beginning at just $400, along with custom golf pants, chinos, dress shirts to be worn both tucked and untucked, and so much more. Not to mention the best selection of men's accessories around as well. Hey, if you're in a wedding party coming up this summer, talk to the fellas about a 15% discount when the entire wedding party gets their suits from F Apparel. And if you have a 2023 high school grad in the fam, get the young man a new custom suit to transition into the next stage of his life. And F Apparel is going to include a free custom shirt and tie valued at about $150. You can make an appointment or find out more online at that's EPHapparel.com, or pop down and see them at 190 Smith Street downtown. And hey, Jets back on the road right now, so there'll be some scoreboard watching tonight, and of course getting out together. If you want to do a little Thursday night get together with the gang, no better place to watch the game than your local Boston Pizza. Scarf down those gourmet pizzas, world famous Boston's wings, ice cold schooners, and more. Pick a player contest at most local BPs, and of course the big game on the big screen. And hey, if you're staying at home, you can always order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, Rewucki still to come. Pat Steinberg in Calgary with more on the race in the West. Right now, though, let's welcome in TSN's Frankie Corrado. Frank, what's going on, man? It's great to have you back on WST.
Thank you so much for having me. Nice to be back.
Well, I have to tell you, you're coming at a good time because we need some answers. This is the Winnipeg Jets have become the most puzzling hockey club maybe in the National Hockey League. 2 months ago, we were talking about a team that was first in the Western Conference. And now, to be honest, coming out of last night, a desperately needed 2 points where you think people would be saying, okay, that's a big win, move forward. Honestly, I think last night leaves more questions than it does answers about where this hockey team is right now, despite getting a very, very much needed 2 in the standings.
I'm really surprised. I am. With the way the Jets played to start the year and through the first half of the year, it almost felt like they had gone through the heavy lifting of whatever was the issue last year. They had worked through that. They had found a way to come out of it on the other side. And you're thinking, okay, like, you've rectified whatever it was that was ailing you, whether it was star players being frustrated, not engaged, not playing consistent on a night-to-night basis, giving up too much in front of Connor Hellebuck. Like, I truly thought they were on the other side of that, but they're right back in it. And that's the thing that scares probably a lot of Jets fans and a lot of us who watch this team play very often. It's like, why are these old habits creeping back into your game? It's a new coach. You know, we've heard the narratives all season long as far as how they bought into playing this system under Rick Bowness, and it was a little stingier defensively. And, you know, we were seeing a lot of the great of Connor Hellebuck early on in the season. And yes, he's a guy who gets called upon more often than a lot of goaltenders. But quite frankly, the team in front of him was doing a much better job at that point. And now it's like, it's a constant onslaught in front of Hellebuck. And there isn't that kind of intensity to keep players out of the slot and getting those chances. And there's just not as much urgency offensively. Like, I did the game on Saturday against the Nashville Predators, and I was kind of shocked to see how many times UC Saros could just see a puck Like, it was just, there was no traffic in front of him. There was no urgency as far as making sure someone kind of stopped and planted there and made sure he wasn't able to see things. And quite frankly, like, they've kind of lost that edge that they were playing with to start the year. Like, how many times do you see them play the Leafs and they get up for that kind of game and Dubois is in Matthews' kitchen all game, it seems like. And there's a little sandpaper, there's a little extra energy to it. I know you can't play like that over 82 games, and you can have little lapses throughout the course of a season, but it's really gone on way too long now. They've lost whatever magic they had in the first half of the year.
Well, and they've also lost the entire cushion that they had earned at the beginning of the year. And I mean, this is what's so confounding, Frank. I mean, we're talking about game 71 of the regular season, playing for your playoff lives. And even when good things happen like they did in the first period, I mean, complete regression. I just have no idea how you can get dominated for a full 20 minutes like they did by the Arizona Coyotes in the situation they were in last night after getting 2 goals in the first period.
And that's the thing that's puzzling to me. Listen, I've played for some coaches that maybe I didn't agree with or didn't care for. And I played some coaches that I thought were excellent. Rick Bowness is one of those guys that I thought was absolutely brilliant. Excellent coach, wanted to play for him every single night. And when you look at the comparisons between the teams that are in the mix right now in the Western Conference, you have Winnipeg, who you talk about the cushion, it's kind of going away. But the Calgary Flames are chasing them, but not really, because the Calgary Flames are in a way just playing just as bad or maybe worse. And in that situation, I can kind of understand. It feels like there's a little more tension there between the coaching staff and the players. And there's been some things that have come out of that room this year, whether it was the Jacob Pelletier situation or, Jonathan Huberdeau. And it feels like there's been some tension there. I think Nazem Kadri has voiced some opinions this year as well. So over there, like, I can almost understand it being an ex-player when they come out for a game in Calgary and it's like, oh, you guys are in a playoff push. Where's that push? Where's that extra jump in your step? You don't seem to have it. I don't understand it for Winnipeg. I really don't. Bowness is a new coach. He's done a really good job of turning this team around, and it felt like he had them really bought in on a certain mindset and mentality. And quite frankly, when you're in like a free fall, the way the Winnipeg Jets are in, this sort of tailspin, you would think there's enough veteran leadership and presence in that room, on the ice, on the bench, to kind of grab a hold of things and not hold the coaching staff as the guys that need to hold everyone accountable. Like, that's the difference between good teams and great teams, and you hear it all the time. And it's a different situation because Boston is very dominant, but why don't we take a look at Boston? Anyone who's ever played for that team, and even Jim Montgomery has talked about it this year, it's like, that's a room that kind of just operates on its own. It polices itself. Like, Montgomery came in and all he had to do was kind of listen to the players that had already established that, whereas Bowness had to come in and he had to change a lot of things. He had to turn things around and have players buy in on a certain mentality. And going back to what I said previously, I really thought the heavy lifting was done and they were on the other side of it. It's weird to see the old habits creeping back into this team's game. And even like the body language, the frustration, it really is puzzling to me.
Well, and Frank, I mean, you can maybe speak to this. I mean, National Hockey League coaches only have so many cards that they can play. And it was, I guess, last week on Tuesday, after a couple wins, Rick Bowness sat Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, and Nito Niederreiter for an extended period in that game. And, when you do that, you're looking for some sort of response. And frankly, they've had a response. It's been the exact opposite, I think, of what the coaches were intending to get out of that. And it just seems to be so problematic when the biggest issues are starting with your most important players, the guys that play the most, that you rely the most on every single night.
That's exactly it. You're 100% right. This is a league like many other leagues in hockey and every sport. You win and lose with your leaders. You win and lose with your best players. And the best players, their play has dropped off. It's funny, like, I'm watching Winnipeg's power play the other night, and Blake Wheeler, who's a very good player, been a good player for a long time, he's on the half wall. And I'm thinking, that's not a spot for Blake Wheeler, right? Like, it seemed like every time the power play, first of all, had a hard time getting into the zone, which I thought was a glaring issue. But anytime they actually did get into the zone, I'm like, okay, everyone's kind of like getting the puck, and then they're getting their head up, and then they're processing things, and then they're making a decision. It's like, it's way too slow. There needs to be something there where it's like, you kind of know what your scheme is, what your plan is. And as you're getting the puck, or before you get the puck, you took a quick peek, you know what you want to do with it. When they do that, power play is not bad. But it's so slow right now. It's very methodical. It seems like it would be pretty easy to sniff out what they're trying to do. So that's one of the other issues. And then as far as the 5-on-5 play goes, it's perimeter. Like, it really is perimeter right now. So it is puzzling, because I've been in kind of like game review meetings, and I think the coaches do a good job of making sure that there's one idea or thought, and they really hammer that home. And when you watch Winnipeg play, it's hard to not think that thought or that idea they're trying to hammer home is there needs to be a presence in the middle of the ice, whether it's getting the puck off the wall in the defensive zone, in the neutral zone, even maybe more importantly in the offensive zone, and finding ways to try and penetrate the middle of the ice. They don't seem to be doing that very well. And there's like no presence in front of any kind of net they're playing in front of. It's really weird, because they have bigger bodies. They have guys that aren't afraid to go to those areas. And yeah, it's the star players. Like, you're not going to win games with Vlad Namestnikov and Barron. They're nice pieces. And when they're slotted correctly, they add something to your team. But ultimately, this comes down to the guys that have been here for a long time, that have had the trials and tribulations of last year, all the noise throughout the offseason, and the guys that you thought when everything was going great, it was really positive. Now's kind of when you see what you got, right? Because it was going great, not going great now. And we're starting to see, like, I don't know if you see it as well, but I see the body language. I see the frustration. And if a coach is going to sit you for a period of time, it's not because he hates you, not because he doesn't like you, not because anything. The coach needs you. He needs those players to be at their best. And if he's doing that, it seems like a last resort. It really seems like he's ran out of things to do, because if you can resolve something without having to embarrass your star players, likely there were multiple avenues that were explored before it got to that point.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, it does seem like a last resort. And I guess when you make decisions like this, I mean, it can go a couple ways. The response of those players is what will determine how good of a move it was. You can have guys that go back to kind of, it is somewhat of a wake-up call and get back to doing what they're doing. I guess in some cases, and we might be seeing it right now, it almost pushes them farther away from where they are. And that is a big, big problem for the Winnipeg Jets right now. I mean, from your playing career, can you remember, star players on a team being challenged in the way that Rick Bowness has, trying to get more to the guys that you depend on the most, and it not resulting in the way that the coach intended?
Yeah, I mean, listen, for me, like, I was never I don't want to say relevant player in the NHL, but I had some moments throughout my career, whether it was the AHL or times throughout the NHL, where I didn't have my game. And it felt like it was more often than not, to be honest with you. The thing that I found very challenging was I was really hard on myself as a player. And anytime I would make a mistake, I would just kind of grab a hold of that, and I couldn't let it go. And I feel like a lot of players nowadays, it almost feels like, I'm not doing anything wrong. It's you, or it's that guy. And it's like, that's the wrong mentality to have. And I don't think that's, indicative of a lot of players on the Winnipeg Jets, but you never know. And when you see certain things, it kind of perks your interest. It's like, okay, why are you frustrated? Are you frustrated because you're not finding your game and you're going through a spell where it's just not coming to you the way it usually does? Or are you looking back at your coach and thinking, guy doesn't get it, or he doesn't understand, and I'm checked out? Because that's a losing attitude. That's a losing mentality. And I've been pretty lucky throughout the course of my career, where I played with some pretty special players. I played with the Sedin twins in Vancouver. I got to play with some awesome players in Toronto. Like some awesome people. I got to play a cup of coffee with the Pittsburgh Penguins and see how those players and Crosby and Letang, those guys operate. So I think I got to see the players where have it for whatever reason, and they were frustrated because they couldn't put it together. And sometimes it takes time. I just wonder with the Jets, are they at that point, and are they trying to come out of it better on the other side? Listen, everyone wants to win. Everyone wants to be a part of the solution, or so they say, right? Like sometimes your actions speak louder than words. And so I've seen it throughout the course of my career. I've seen coaches be really hard on star players. Like Tortorella is a guy I played for in Vancouver. That season was very well documented as far as, what he demanded on players. I don't think having high demands for a player is an issue, and for a team, I really don't. When you see coaches being condescending, kind of degrading and really going out of their way to embarrass guys, that's kind of where I would say, it more falls on the coach, and I can understand players kind of tuning those guys out. I don't see that with Winnipeg. I don't think Rick Bowness is trying to call guys out and embarrass them and be demeaning in any way, shape, or form. I think he sees a team that knows there's more there. He knows there's more capability. And like the players would be frustrated when you're not having it and you're maybe not having a great stretch of hockey, there would be frustration for the coach because there's only so much you can do. You can't be out there playing for the players. You can only give them the tools and resources to help them, but ultimately that falls on them. So I sense a lot of frustration right now in Winnipeg from the players going through a bad patch of hockey, not playing their best hockey, but from the coach who knows that the bar has been set a little higher for this team and they've underachieved for a long time now.
Frankie Corrado, TSN's with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. It's interesting you mentioned that because watching the way Rick Bowness has handled the media has changed over the course of this season. I mean, when they were a first-place hockey club in the first half of the year, he was far more willing to, even after wins, point out that, the way the team played last night wasn't going to get it done, not necessarily calling out individuals, but preaching that, you need to do these things the right way. And even in a win, they maybe didn't do that. They really did preach the accountability. Over the course of the last month or so, Frank, as this is really the bottom sort of seemingly fallen out on this club, he hasn't gone back there. He's sort of tried to focus a little bit more on the positives or what positives he could get out of some of these games, including losses. And to me, it just speaks to sort of the fragility of the mental side of this Winnipeg Jets club right now.
Yeah, I would agree. And as much as players like to tell you they don't read things, they don't see things, sometimes you're just on your phone and things pop up. And one of the things that seemed to pop up a lot throughout my playing career was what the coach would say after the game. And for whatever reason, there's some coaches around the league that don't come in and address the team after every single game. So sometimes you sit there with your thoughts and you kind of wonder, how it went for you internally. You have a pretty good feeling about that. But sometimes you're just so entrenched in your own game that maybe you don't know, you don't know what the coach was thinking. You don't know what was happening with other things around the ice. And so you'll see a little clip of a post-game presser from your coach. And so I think coaches like to control the narrative a little bit more. Going back to early on in the season, I agree with you. There were times where the Winnipeg Jets would win games and Bowness would kind of say, yeah, it wasn't our best stuff, but we'll obviously take the win. And I think there's something to be said for that because he's not fooling himself. He's not kidding himself when he says that kind of stuff. There are times where teams go on stretches where they win games, but they're not playing their best hockey. Maybe they got some hot goaltending. Maybe they got some timely goals and took advantage of teams. I think it's important to recognize that and remember that, okay, although we've won games here, that's great. That's currency in the bank. Over the long term here, there's things that we're going to need to rectify if we want this to be sustainable. And that's kind of what he's talking about there. And the fact that we've gotten to the point where maybe those things that he was talking about in the long term have kind of come to fruition, like these sort of bad habits from last year that are creeping back into their game. He was probably onto something. And now he's really just trying to control the narrative and say, okay, like, I want to get this team going. I'm seeing some positives. It's like you need to try and find a way to hammer that message home to your team that there's something to build off here. Because if he runs the risk of losing his team or getting them tuned out, if he, after losses when it's not going well, really kind of buries it even more. So I think he is being careful. And I would say he's probably telling them the same thing in the room, right? It's funny, when you watch a 60-minute game, there are things that happen that are actually good clips. And you can pull those good clips, you can show them to your team, and you can be like, okay, This is the good stuff we're doing, right? The problem is the bad stuff is bigger and more frequent than I would like it to be. And maybe you pick one or two things like I talked about earlier and kind of hammer that message home. But I think it is important in a way for coaches to understand the personalities in that room and understand which buttons you can push. From playing against some of these guys, watching them play now for a long time, Rick Bowness is kind of doing it the right way. I think he knows there's some players there that he runs the risk of kind of losing them along the way if he pushes them a little too much in a way they don't like. I'm not saying that's right. I don't think that's the way players should necessarily operate, but sometimes you just got to make do with what you have and trying to maximize the best of that situation.
You know, Frank, it's funny that you mentioned, the video and showing them positive things. You did the game against the Preds on Saturday. And, I thought the Jets worked really hard to battle back from those two 1-goal deficits. And the second goal that Adam Lowry scored, being in front of the net, grabbing a rebound, scoring in the greasy areas was exactly what's been missing and exactly what Rick Bowness has been preaching. And I joked that they should just have that goal on a loop in the dressing room going into the St. Louis game. And unfortunately it became a no-fly zone, i.e. no Jets in and around Joel Hofer. And, for a young guy making his second start of the year and fourth or fifth career start, the easiest 33-save shutout he'll ever have. It's so confounding that, you can hear the message, you can see the results of what happens when you do it, and then completely get away from it, especially at a time that's so crucial to be doing the things right with what's on the line right now for a team like Winnipeg.
Yeah, it is really puzzling. And, okay, so if I go through the Winnipeg Jets roster right now, okay, like Kyle Connor, he's having a good year. He's over a point per game. He's got 27 goals. Maybe not the goal scoring that we have come to expect from last season. He's not one of those guys that's going to be in and around the front of the net causing a stir. Mark Scheifele, probably not that guy either. Pierre-Luc Dubois certainly should be. Absolutely. That's his bread and butter. Blake Wheeler absolutely should be. I would like to see a little more of that from Nick Ehlers, 9 goals on the year, and likes to play that high-flying kind of game, which, I can appreciate. But every once in a while, you need to make your presence known in and around the front of the net. I always kind of bring things back to other teams, other players around the league, right? And maybe how their reputation is. And I'll bring you to Toronto for a sec. William Nylander, if I asked you, what do you think of Willie Nylander? I bet most people would say, similar to Nick Ehlers, he's that high-flying, really skilled forward, maybe a perimeter player, maybe floats in and out of it a little bit. And I wouldn't disagree with you, but when you take a look at the goals Nylander has scored this year and even last year, a lot of them, actually, I'm pretty sure last year he led the team in goals in and around that inner slot net front area. He was one of those guys, it was in the top 2 or 3, let's say. And you don't think of him that way, but he's been very productive that way. So even though you don't think of a player like that, and maybe the player doesn't think of himself like that, ultimately, you have to take a few cross checks every once in a while to score a goal. You have to go somewhere that maybe you don't feel like, or it feels unnatural. I would see this problem when I played too on teams that I played on. It was there was no one in front of the net. There was a play in the Nashville game. Dylan DeMello got a puck at the point, and he's looking up at the net, and all he's looking at is UC Saros. Literally, all he's looking at is Saros. And he tries to make this pass off the net, and it was a pass that kind of got deflected, and it ends up going in the corner. I believe it was in the second period. But that just kind of goes to show you that guy is looking for someone, because he knows that shot is going right into the Saros breadbasket, but there's no one to be found there. So I thought it was a really good job by Lowry. And when you talk about players who kind of make their living in the dirty areas of the ice, that's a great example of it. And to be honest with you, I would take Adam Lowry on my team as a third-line center any day of the week, because I think he does a lot of things really well, and that's one of them. But sometimes it needs to be the star players who do something that's a little unnatural, maybe a little more foreign to them, and say, okay, regardless of the team kind of rolling around here on the perimeter in the offensive zone, and I want to get open for my shot. If I'm Scheifele, I want to get open for my wrist shot one-timer that I do. And I don't know, man. Sometimes you just got to go against the grain and say, just going to stop in front of the net here and see if I can bang one home. And yeah, I'm going to have to take a cross check or two, but let's be honest. Like, it's not like it's not Darian Hatcher in front of the net anymore with a 2x4, laying it down on the, on your back. Like there's not as much punishment in front of the net anymore. And once you've established that, like if you get there before the defenseman, they're kind of restricted now because we've seen them crack down on cross-checking. So I know we're getting long-winded here when it comes to like being in front of the net, scoring goals, but really like there's no excuse for it at this point. They know the recipe. They know they need to do it. It's just a matter of, is someone or multiple players going to do it on a more consistent basis?
Frank, just before we go, I've got to ask you about special teams. And, we were just mentioning Lowry. He had the huge goal on Saturday, ended up scoring the winner last night, shorthanded. But the power play for the Winnipeg Jets is absolutely killing them. Not only is it not scoring, but any momentum they seem to have gets sucked out of the building and the team when they have these ineffective power plays. I mean, from your experience, when a power play has been in a real funk, you can change personnel, I guess, but what do you think the Winnipeg Jets coaches are saying to themselves inside that coaching room about the power play? And what can you do to spark some life when the guys that aren't getting it done really are the most skilled players and the guys that you really need to lean on in those situations because of the makeup of your team?
It's difficult because you want to give players autonomy to be creative and do what they do well and play to their strengths, especially on the power play. Like if you're a regular first unit power play player in the NHL, you're probably a pretty special player and you have a pretty unique skill set. With that being said, typically when power plays start to struggle, there's not enough of a shot mentality being had. There's not enough of a net front presence, and that's in the offensive zone. But where it comes before that is you're probably just not getting into the zone enough, really. Like their entries have not been good. They have not been crisp, and it's too many like failed attempts down the ice, another failed attempt down the ice. So really it starts with the entry. And then once you finally get set up, it's like too many wasted opportunities, too many times where puck will kind of travel around the outside and there's a shot that gets blocked or someone gets a stick on a pass and it disrupts things. So I've seen times where coaches kind of put this thing into place where if you win a face-off in the offensive zone on the power play, let's try and get that puck to the net 5 seconds. Like that puck needs to be delivered to the net in 5 seconds. So everyone is on the same page as far as, okay, if it goes back to the point and we know Morrissey has it, and maybe it goes to the half wall to Scheifele or Connor, it's like, all right, we got 2 seconds left. Someone needs to get in and around the net front area because it's coming there. And then that leads to the next part. It's like, can you retrieve a puck and then set up again? Because a lot of the time, whether it's a shot or a tip or a nice play, the first play doesn't get it done. Like you need to wear penalty kills down. So that's why you talk about you take a shot early, everyone's kind of scrambling defensively. Okay, where's the puck? You have one extra player on the ice. You should be the ones retrieving it. Now you set it up again. And now maybe because you took a shot, maybe some seams will open up. Maybe you're able to get it to Connor or Scheifele for that one-timer. Maybe it's that bumper player in the middle of the ice that opens up. I don't know. But it can't just be one of those things where, okay, we're going to half-ass it up the ice, expect to win a battle, luckily, and then get set up, and it'll be 1 or 2 passes. Maybe we'll play with it behind the net a little bit. Maybe we'll get an opportunity to score. It's like, that's not happening. Everything on the Winnipeg power play is slow and methodical. It kind of just needs to be one of those things that, okay, there's a purpose, a mentality. We're going to retrieve the puck, and we're doing it all over again, and it becomes a cycle.
Frankie, this has been so awesome. Thanks for doing this. We're going to see you on any TSN Jets broadcast coming up over the next couple of weeks?
I think I'm done for the year. If Craig Button is so nice to let me fill in for him towards the end of the year, maybe you'll see me.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'd love to catch up maybe closer to the playoffs and have you back on. This was a lot of fun. Really appreciate you taking the time, and keep up the great work out in TO.
Anytime. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Oh, man, what a great conversation with Frank Corrado. He is really turning into a rising star at TSN. I really appreciate him coming on. Hopefully we'll get him on again, maybe a little closer to the playoffs. All right, Brandon Rewucki's coming up. We'll also check in on the Calgary Flames and what's going on in this race. if you want to call it that, for the 8th spot in the Western Conference. Pat Steinberg coming up in a few minutes. Quick update for you. Carrie Einarson and her squad lost to Germany earlier today. They're at 5-3 now and down 2-0 with the hammer playing the Koreans as we get closer to the end of the round robin over at the World Women's Curling Championship. The entire province and country pulling for Team Einarson. Keep you up to date on that one. Of course, our curling reports are brought to you by a great supporter of curling, both here in Manitoba and around the country. And that would be our great friends at Princess Auto. Princess Auto is where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Pop by and see them Panet Road or Portage Avenue West, and you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Got to give a big shout out to our friends over at Culligan Water for their great support over the last couple years. They are the leaders in all water products and services and have been doing it for over 65 years as a family-owned business here in Winnipeg. They've got it all: water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, drinking water systems, citywide water delivery services, and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. Pop by and see them at 1200 Sargent Avenue. Give them a call at 694-5180, or you can check out everything that they've got going on for you and your family and your business online at drinkculligan.com. And a big cheers to our friends at Canadian Club, Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and your boys here at Winnipeg Sports Talk. Big flash sale coming up Friday to Sunday at your local Manitoba liquor marts, with the Canadian Club 12-year reserve on sale, regularly priced at $32, on sale at $24 and change for 3 days only. So make sure to pop down, and while you're there, see if there's any remaining stock of that limited re-release of the Canadian Club Chronicles 41-year-old. A limited amount came to Manitoba and were put out on the shelves on Saturday. Big thanks to Canadian Club for their support of WST. Let's get Rewucki in here. Brandon, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. What's going on with you guys?
Well, we've obviously obsessing about the Jets and what the heck's going on with this hockey club. Before we do that, though, did you see the end of the World Baseball Classic last night?
Oh, you bet your ass I did.
Oh, my God. And this is kind of an upbeat. Everyone was watching the hockey game. I obviously was at the game. I said yesterday on the show, if we could possibly get a scenario, as Ohtani said that he was going to come out of the bullpen at some point, just give us an Ohtani Trout at bat at some point. Who could have imagined it would be the final out, striking out Mike Trout, and the Japanese win? The biggest take amongst hockey fans is this has been a lot of fun to watch, but it's pissing everybody off because we, for whatever reason, can't have that in hockey.
Yeah, I wonder why. Oh, well, at least we can all enjoy our Fanatics gear for the next decade. That'll probably make things a little bit easier for everyone. Yeah, I mean, I texted my brother right when the 8th, 9th inning, and I basically said, this might be the greatest thing I've ever seen in baseball. Like it was just maybe it was the coolest thing. I don't like greatest, the Joey Bats bat flip might be up there, but you'll just never get something like that ever, right? And to have two legendary teammates too going at it head to head like that, that was special. I mean, the whole tournament was special, and then you literally could not have wrote a better ending to that possible script than having Ohtani go up against Trout one-on-one there. I mean, it would literally be like Connor McDavid putting on the pads and facing Austin Matthews in a shootout. You know what I mean? Like it's impossible to happen in any other sport. And I mean that WBC that's got to be one of the biggest wins for a sport that we've seen in a generation. Because it seemed like baseball was on a one-way ticket down, down, down. And man, that's all anybody spoke about for the past couple of weeks here. And yeah, like bringing it back over to hockey, that's just been a massive, massive momentum killer for the growth of the sport, right? Or at least having it be popular and on the radar of everybody, over the course of a couple of weeks, especially if they got it done, before the season, before the NFL gets underway, kind of a dead spot in the schedule there. NHL officials should be scrambling right now to try to put something together. I can understand this year it might not be doable, but if you can find a way to make it work, and if you have a rink open anywhere in August, like find a way to get the WHC up and going quickly.
I just keep thinking about that GIF on the internet of the guy that just goes, "Figure it out." Like that's basically where we are at, and yeah, I mean, Ohtani, all-time legend of the sport. And I guess the only thing now to happen after, Trout and Ohtani go head-to-head in the WBC is watch the Angels go 75-87 once we get going for the playoffs. Let's get to the game.
Just quickly, it was funny. I was watching it, and my wife came down, and I was, explaining Ohtani, Trout, two legends. And she's like, the Angels must be amazing. I'm like, if only you've seen the tweets that have been explaining this for the past 3 years.
Let's get to the Jets. Hey, bottom line, they had to win. They did. But as I talked about with Michael Remis, I mean, the way things went in that second period, just incredibly concerning. And I mean, almost more questions than answers coming out of that game. Although, bottom line was they kept pace with both Nashville and Calgary, who had big wins last night.
Yeah, that's about all the positivity you can muster for this one, I think, right? There just wasn't a whole lot. It was basically just a good first period. Not a great first, but a good first period. And then good goaltending. And, hey, that's going to be enough for this team in about 4 of their next 5 games, to be totally honest with you. Just that base level of play is probably going to essentially book their ticket to the postseason no matter what. So, I mean, there's that. But, yeah, if you were looking for something to latch onto, that this team is going to find a way to maybe make some noise, maybe surprise some people to the postseason, this was the exact opposite of what you were hoping for. It was basically just a game that kept everybody from completely going overboard and pitchforks and all that, right? I mean, none of the issues that have been plaguing this team for weeks and months now were solved, and in some cases they were even exacerbated because the power play is just finding. I mean, there's that light that's way up there. That was rock bottom. And that was about a couple of weeks ago. And the power play it's shockingly bad. And these worries about finishing and creating offense and this and that, it's still there. And what is maybe most worrisome to me, Huss, is especially from the second period on, if you were watching that game and somebody said one team is battling for a playoff spot and one team is basically playing out the last dozen or so games, intensity-wise, could you pick out which one that was? You'd have a hard time figuring out who was who, and if anything, you might lean towards Arizona. That's been the thing that's really upset me over this last, specifically, week or so, is just that it's one thing to go through slumps and this and that, but there's just so many games where it's lifeless, and it's just like, where is the urgency? Where is this intensity level that this team came out of the gate with to start the year? It's somehow gone missing when it should be ramping up at the most important time.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, it is a great mystery of this club, and it's incredibly concerning. The fact that we're having these conversations after the 72nd game of the season was a helly game last night. I mean, there was a guy, as I mentioned, there was some ugly body language at times last night by members of the Winnipeg Jets. Certainly wasn't the case of Hellebuck. A perfect example of him putting the club on his back. Although he got a jacket afterwards, and someone pointed it out in chat. What does it say about last night's performance that Morgan Barron got the jacket playing 5 minutes in the game?
Yeah, and he probably was their best skater. They probably picked the right guy. It's just the ultimate indictment of the team that it's somebody that's... And that's the other thing that's kind of bizarre right now is we're seeing, Morgan Barron to me has been... I would put Barron... Niederreiter, and then those two up above everybody else, and then Nemesnikov just underneath them as the team's best forwards for quite some time now. And Morgan Barron's just been stapled to the fourth line while we see Kyle Connor go 20% in the defensive zone and Blake Wheeler look like a shell of himself. The accountability that happened earlier in the year is that's a tough that's tough for a guy like Morgan Barron who's busted his ass and playing really, really well. And being a force penalty kill 5-on-5, and your reward for that is not even cracking double digits, right? There's a lot of things that are perplexing about this team right now. And it's really every level of the organization. Like the players look like they're in la la land. The coaching decisions that are being made right now are extremely perplexing. And, management is basically left looking at this mess here saying, hey, we thought this was a team that could be a cup contender, right? Like it's all going downhill despite a win against Arizona. And again, it's happening at the worst time.
And I mean, the biggest culprits right now are the most important players on the club. I will give Nikolai Ehlers credit. I mean, I thought that he showed a lot in standing up to Braden Shen. I mean, trying to give a spark to his club and obviously paying a price personally for doing that with a bunch of haymakers to the dome. But, I mean, you mentioned Kyle Connor. He is in a fog right now, as bad as I can remember at any point with the Winnipeg Jets. And they finally split up, he and Mark Scheifele last night after the second period. And I would hope that will continue. I think you've got a much better chance of maybe lighting a fire and getting Kyle Connor going away from Scheifele back with Dubois, where he's had some of his best success. But, I mean, Mark Scheifele, if this guy is your number one center, you need more from him. What do you see right now when you see Mark out on the ice over this past little while?
It's just night and day to the guy we saw in the first month of the season. And it's not a lack of effort. It's not that he's not trying out there, but he was a force early on in the season. Like he was just noticeable, and the points weren't even coming in bunches for him back then, right? Like he was scoring a bunch of goals, didn't have too many assists. He had like 2 assists in his first dozen or so games, but I thought he was their best player for the first couple months of the season because he was all over the ice. He's making plays, both ends of the rink. He's being physical. He was leading the charge, and it's just been a regression to the guy that we've seen over the past couple of seasons. And again, I don't know what the answer is for that, right? Like that shouldn't be taking place for him because he's getting his ice time. Seems like he was reborn under the new head coach. And for whatever reason, you got it for a brief snapshot, and then it's been completely gone since then. And I really do think that, we talk about leader, who's the leader on this team, but for whatever reason, when Scheifele's going, this is just a different team, right? Like I feel like if he is the guy out there making a difference, shift in, shift out, the rest of the team seems to follow suit. And I'm not going to necessarily blame just him for the malaise this team has been in since the new year. But at some point, you got to look at him and say, like, put the boys on your back for a couple of shifts and lead these guys.
There's nobody on this team that could do more to get the collective unit out of it than Mark Scheifele stepping up right now. And, we talked about this in our last segment with Frank Corrado. Coaches only have so many cards that they can play. And, Rick Bowness benched that line for 12 minutes or whatever it was last week in Carolina. And maybe the most concerning thing when you want to talk about leadership, character, however you want to describe it, has been what's happened with those guys. In particular, I'm not going to include Niederreiter. I think he's bringing it every night. He's physical. He's a guy that is, playing and setting an example. But the response of those two players to that benching, I mean, Rick Bowness didn't do that frivolously. There was a method to the madness, and I think it was important. And the other lines were playing better, and I think that was the sort of accountability you needed to throw out there. But man, I mean, when you make that move, you're doing it to get more out of those players, and I haven't seen any upward tick for the most part from two of the most important and highly paid guys on the club since that was done last week.
Yeah, and I mean, completely different situations for both of them too, right? Like there's a part of me that kind of wonders with Scheifele's uncertain future from last offseason to this one, if it's a case of, I've got 1 foot out the door already, I kind of know maybe I'm not going to be here. You know what I mean? Like I wonder if there's an element of that with Scheifele's game. With Kyle Connor, it's completely different, right? Yeah. Like he's signed long term. He's got a big money deal. He's being paid handsomely. He is given loads and loads of ice time, right? And you're seeing, in my opinion, from him, at times a lack of effort in the defensive zone. I mean, the offensive side of things, that's going to ebb and flow with all these guys. Like it just happens. And I think the big differentiator for Connor right now, when you look at him compared to the other top wingers in the NHL, is that when he's not scoring, he doesn't do a whole lot to help the team, if anything. But you look at the other best wingers in the NHL, and there's a couple of them out there in Boston, and you watch them play compared to what 81 does on some of these nights, and it's night and day. And the scary thing is I don't know like what the reason is for that. If you're Kyle Connor, like how do you get more out of him at this point? I don't know what the answer is, and maybe he just is who he is, right? Like a scorer that when he's putting the puck in the net and creating offense, he's great and he's one of the best in the league at it. But when he's not, he's going to kill you. I mean, there's some guys that are like that, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. You know, he's still pretty good value, right? If he's, in a bad season, he's putting up a point a game. I mean, you could probably live with that, but I think it does speak a little bit to the, the future of the makeup of this team. Is do you want to have potentially 3-4 guys that are like that in the forward core? I mean, you can live with one of them for sure. I mean, there's been teams that have won cups with guys that are a little one-dimensional, but can you have 3 or 4 guys like that? And right now, the Winnipeg Jets have those guys. They've shown more in the past, and I think they're capable of more and they can do it, which is also frustrating because you know it's in them. But, when you look at the macro view of this whole thing, you do wonder, you have to pick and choose which of these guys are going to be somebody that, you can't rely on to be an all-around force. Who's going to be the one that sticks around? We'll see what happens there in the next little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as Connor goes, I mean, you can only hope that he scores a goal and all of a sudden they start coming. Because you're right. I mean, this guy, we're never going to be, won the Lady Byng last year, we're never going to be talking about Kyle Connor in the Selke race. But I mean, he's a guy that could potentially be in the Rocket Richard race at some point, at the height of his game. And, you really hope that does turn around. And I'm sure you agree. I mean, splitting he and Mark Scheifele up is frankly, in my opinion, was overdue. And I know we're going to hear Bones spoke after practice today. I mean, I would expect Dubois and Connor to be together tomorrow night when they drop the puck in Anaheim.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been the obvious decision for quite some time. I mean, to me, I would love to know the reasoning for this. I don't know why it is, but this team's best line so far this season has been put together for a grand total of 3.5 games. I don't know a team that does that. It is so bizarre to me, especially
and that's Ehlers with Dubois and Connor.
Correct. Yeah. And it's one thing. Like, I mean, there's been times when Scheifele and pick your guy that's gone along with him have been able to produce pretty consistently here. But when you've gone so long without scoring, why not put your eggs? And the funny thing too is, Rick Bowness did that to some pretty good success out there in Dallas last year where they couldn't score a goal. Well, let's put Hintz, Pavelski, Robertson out there. They carried the team when they needed it, right? So I wonder why it's just so, it's so baffling to me why they haven't gone back to that. And I think there's enough guys now that the deadline has passed and there's some new additions here. Like I think this team can rejig their top 9 into something that can be maybe not fearsome, but certainly more potent than it's been over the last little while here. And
well,
so
I'll tell you what,
I think
if you do that, I would include a guy we talked about a little earlier in Morgan Barron, who I think really since that Saturday night Edmonton game has been one of the best players. And I'll be honest, I mean, I've loved what Nemetsnikov has done. But I was stunned, frankly, that it was Barron moving down to the 4th line and potentially not Appleton when, they did make those moves. And I mean, certainly you saw him and what he did last night. That's a guy that is earning more ice time, probably more to what he was getting earlier on this year. And that's another thing that I expect to see when they drop the puck tomorrow in Anaheim.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why Morgan Barron shouldn't be in the top 9 for the Jets right now. He's one of their best 9 forwards. And it's not like he's out there hurting you in the defensive zone, right? Like, I've always been a big fan of his. And I think there's a little more that can be done there in terms of unlocking his offensive potential. For me, I do think Dubois, Connor, Ehlers is the trio that should be put together. That's not your 1A line. It's your number 1 line, and they get 20-plus minutes a night. then I think you drop Blake Wheeler down to the third line where, he just doesn't have any gas left in the tank right now. Like I think it helps. I think it helps him, and it's almost a little unfair to him to be playing him 16 plus minutes a night right now. So having him drop that ice time down, I think you get a better Blake Wheeler. And then whether it's a mixture of, Nemesnikov, Niederreiter, whoever it might be alongside Mark Scheifele there, I think that gives you more than enough to get this thing going a little bit offensively here. So we'll see what happens over the next little stretch. I mean, the game Thursday is going to be a bit of an intriguing one, but the matchups they're pretty juicy for the club in this next little bit here, aren't they?
Well, they have to have them. They have to have them.
Yeah.
We're going to talk to Pat Steinberg in a minute about the Flames, and I went through this yesterday, and I'm sure you've been looking at it. The Flames' final 7 games of the regular season, and there's 10 games to go, involve a game against the Winnipeg Jets and 6 teams that are making tee times right now. We saw them handle the Ducks last night, and granted, they didn't do it last week at home. But, I mean, to me, the Jets and their situation is going to be entirely dependent on this next week and a half. You got to beat Anaheim. You got to beat San Jose. You have to get at least one win, whether it be LA or the Detroit Red Wings. And then maybe you've got enough of a cushion to weather what I expect will be a big push from the Flames at the end of the season. And you might even get a chance to give Connor Hellebuck one night off before the end of the season. We'll see about that. Hey, just before we go, because I want to get to Pat, just 30 seconds or so, what the hell can they do about this power play?
Deny it? Like, just don't
decline.
Like, can we get an extra timeout instead of 5-on-4? Like, it is. I said this. I know statistically there are worse power plays in the NHL. This is the worst power play unit in the NHL right now, and it's not even close. It's shocking to me. I again, when you're struggling, go to your best players. And who are your 4 best offensive players? It's, despite some of their woes right now, Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Nikolai Ehlers, and Pierre-Luc Dubois. It's those 4 with Josh Morrissey, and you hope they figure it out. Like that to me is the one thing. I feel like with Blake Wheeler spending too much time on this power play, it gets static, it gets predictable, and it loses an offensive threat. And that to me, that's the one change that I think gives this power play at least a fighting chance of getting a shot on net.
Rewucki, great stuff, man. Thanks as always. We'll look forward to the next edition of Skates and Plates. Sub wherever you get your favorite pods, and we'll talk to you next week and see where this team's at as they try to hang on to that final playoff spot in the West.
Beauty. Can't wait, my man. Have a good week.
Take it easy. There's Brandon Rewucki from the Skates and Plates pod. All right, let's go right out to Calgary and welcome in my guy, Pat Steinberg, the host of Flames Today and, of course, the Flames broadcasts. And, Pat, there's a bit of a turtle race right now in the West. That being said, teams got wins last night that they absolutely had to have. But, I'll just quickly tell a story, folks. After the 8-2 game, I thought I would see what was going on out in Calgary, and I threw on your show. Not surprised that the folks were quite restless about it, but then they did come back with a big win last night. I mean, give us the latest on the ups and downs of the Calgary Flames, because God knows we've had a lot of them here in Winnipeg with the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think, hi Huss, I don't really think that that it's any different, honestly. I mean, the only difference between the two would be that the Jets built up a cushion and the Flames did not. Otherwise, I think because I've been tuning into a lot of Jet stuff and have been very dialed in on Jets Twitter, and it just is. It feels like the same conversations are being had when it comes to the Jets that are being had here in Calgary about the Flames, and that I've seen people talk about how it's over, start playing young guys, tank for Bedard. Like it's incredible to see how parallel they are. And again, the difference is the Jets had a really good first half of the season and built up a cushion, and it's a much easier spot to be protecting than it is to be chasing like the Flames are right now. And But yeah, it's very similar. They've had so many issues beating the teams that they're supposed to beat. And I know they beat Anaheim last night, but Anaheim's been a problem for them. Chicago's been a problem for them. Arizona's been a problem for them. Columbus has been a problem for them. Those are the types of situations that you just can't have if you're going to want to be a playoff team. So they're still in it. The math is the worst of all of the 3 teams still in it for the Flames, or if you put Seattle in the mix, the 4 teams. And now here we go. I hope that Calgary and Winnipeg means something in April. That's the only thing I hope, that game means something in Winnipeg. And then Calgary in their second last game of the year plays Nashville, and you hope that means something as well. But we'll see. I don't know. I mean, the math is not good for Calgary. That is for sure.
I as I mentioned, I tuned in and listened to most of your post game and sort of dozed off after that and woke up and the station was still on. And I listened to the morning show and like the morning show, I listened to probably 45 minutes. I heard Adnan Virk talk about the Oscars and the World Baseball Classic. I heard a nice extended draft segment, and it almost seemed as if that was the final nail in the coffin, certainly to many people listening to the program. Did last night's win change anything around Calgary with the fact that, listen, you got to get one to get on a bit of a roll, and I think everyone that's following this team knows that despite the fact that the Jets squeak one out against the Arizona Coyotes right now, this Winnipeg team is not the high-flying Jets that we saw in the first half of the season, at least right now.
No, I do think I don't know if the win over Anaheim did anything. Like, I don't know if it was, all of a sudden that now they're good to go. It's funny, like the roller coaster ride the Flames have taken their fans on. I mean, even if you go back to so Saturday, Jets and Preds go to overtime. Jets win, which was worst case scenario for Calgary. Then the Flames lose in overtime that night to Dallas. Then the next night, Jets and Preds both lose in regulation. And so it went from Saturday to Sunday. It was, this is over. This is the worst. To LFG, it's back on. Let's go. And then they lose 8-2 to the Kings on Monday, and it's back. No, it's over. Although I don't get the feeling that last night all of a sudden turned it into, no, now it's back on. I mean, they beat a 29th placed Anaheim team that was not very good last night, and the Jets and the Preds and the Kraken all won as well. So I didn't get the same sense that it's right back on. I do think the thing, and to your point, the thing that keeps, for some, their glass half full or keeps the hope alive is the fact that the Jets have been doing a rather poor job of shutting that door, and they have not been able to pick up wins in situations where you think they should. And I mean that 4 points in Florida was pretty impressive, but then you mentioned the St. Louis loss and just squeaking by Arizona. So I think that's what's keeping some Flames fans kind of dialed in, that because Winnipeg is scuffling a little bit here, they've kept the door open a bit. And then there's that Nashville stalking horse with the 3. Like, I know that it's worrisome for the Jets that the Preds are 5 back with 3 in hand, but imagine the Flames, they're 1 back with 3 in hand. And so for Calgary, the math doesn't just suck for, against Winnipeg. It's also no good against Nashville either. So I think there are many here in this market that have kind of already checked out and believe it's not going to happen, but there's enough still that hope that this can still happen and aren't going to completely wave the white flag until it's waved for them. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Calgary does have an easier schedule than many. The Jets have a pretty favorable schedule as well, which doesn't help. But if the Flames can take care of their business, at the very least, they can keep this thing interesting into April now.
Well, and I mean, this next road trip coming up for the Jets, I mean, you get in the Ducks, you're getting the San Jose Sharks. Obviously, the Kings are playing quite well, as Calgary knows from this week. And then a home game against Detroit. I mean, these are the games Winnipeg has to have, because it does get a lot harder when we get into April. And they can't just hold on to this lead they have right now. I really think they need to build on it because of the games that Calgary has on the road. Listen, when you look at disappointing teams or teams that are struggling, often you look at the difference makers, the drivers, the most important players. And, for the Winnipeg Jets, as we've been talking about, some of their key guys have frankly been MIA over the last little while. Little different in Calgary, but it does seem like there's some big issues with some of the top highly paid players, coaching. Yep. I mean, how would you categorize the issues that the Flames are having with the guys that they really lean on to help them win hockey games?
Yeah, plain and simple, probably the biggest issue why the Flames are where they are, and that is on the outside looking in, is that they have not gotten the type of play they need, not just production, but just overall the type of driving they need from their best players. And so
sounds familiar.
The four guys that I point to are Jacob Markstrom, Jonathan Huberdeau, Nazem Kadri, and Elias Lindholm. Now, of those four, Lindholm's been the best, and Lindholm's never really bad, but that guy was the Selke Trophy runner-up last year and was a guy who scored 40 goals, and he might end up being their leading scorer this year, but he has not been the same type of kind of dominant two-way force that he was last year, and losing your 200-point wingers probably doesn't help in that, but Lindholm has not been the same guy. But then when you take a look at Markstrom, and he is sitting at an .889 save percentage. This guy was the runner-up for the Vezina last year. That you can't go from having the top 5 goaltending in the league to bottom 5 goaltending in the league in the span of 1 year and expect that results are going to be the same. So Markstrom has not been good enough, save the last little while here, where for about 8 of his last 10 starts, he's looked far more like himself. And then Huberdeau and Kadri. Huberdeau is about to become a record setter for biggest contract in Flames history next year, and Nazem Kadri is currently the team's highest paid player, and they both have been inconsistent at best this year. There have been nights where Kadri's been really good, but there have been long stretches where he's been invisible or detrimental. And Huberdeau, same thing. And you just, for a team that doesn't have high-end talent like they did, and they're a team that's going to be based on depth and being a group that's the sum of their parts, and then the top parts aren't pulling their weight, you're going to struggle. So it's been that type of year. And the number one reason why the Flames are where they are is because their top players have just not been good enough for 72 games now. And I think that the coach bears some responsibility for that, because I think the coach has not always put players in the best places to succeed at times. I think there's definitely been some butting of heads with Huberdeau and Daryl Sutter. There's no doubt about that. The fact that those guys have been on different pages multiple times this year. I think the same is true with Kadri and other veteran players as well. I think Daryl's approach can be very, very difficult sometimes, especially when you're not winning. And so I think that's played into it. And let's not forget, and this is not even making an excuse, but they lost Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk, who combined for 219 points last year. That's a lot to lose, whether you bring Huberdeau and Kadri in or not. You still have lost the principal drivers of your team last year and the reason why they did what they did last year. So that's been more, I think it's been more of an adjustment maybe than we gave it credit for, that losing those guys and having all the turnover in the offseason. I think it's been more of an adjustment, and it's been more detrimental than maybe we thought it could be, because in this market, and Huss, I think we talked in the summertime, in this market, people were saying, well, they could be better than they were last year. Well, they're definitely not better than they were last year.
Yeah, just speaking of Kadri, I mean, if you could speak to that report from Elliot Friedman earlier this week. I know you were touching on the show, but I'm sure people around here would be interested to hear sort of what is being reported as happening behind the scenes, in particular with Naz in his first year with Calgary.
Well, and essentially what Elliot said was that Nazem, who is a very blunt guy, has not held back in kind of voicing his opinions on what has gone on, why the Flames are where they are, the way Daryl Sutter approaches things, the way that just all of those things, the way that they go about their business, the locker room. He's been very blunt in that regard. And so I think what we're talking about is, I've never met a more blunt human being in my life than Daryl Sutter. Daryl Sutter is as blunt and direct as you'll ever meet, especially when he's inside the walls of a hockey rink and he's in work mode. And so when you've got an extremely blunt human being like Daryl and an extremely blunt human being like Nazem Kadri, I think especially in a year where things are not going the way that you would want them to go, I think there's going to be friction, and I think there's been undoubtedly friction. And Daryl's taken runs at Nazem in the public, and Kadri has, he hasn't really said anything publicly. I think there's been a couple of times where you can read between the lines and feel like he's frustrated in terms of how he's been used and stuff like that. But for the most part, he's been pretty quiet and just been a pretty good soldier when it comes to how he talks about things publicly. But goes right back to it, Huss. I think that there have been multiple times, especially since the All-Star break, where Kadri and Daryl have not been on the same page. And when you've got your highest paid player and your key prized free agent offseason acquisition and your future Hall of Fame, 2-time Stanley Cup winning head coach who are not seeing eye to eye and who have at times kind of been oil and water, it's going to make an impact. So I think that's what we're talking about with Kadri and Daryl. I think very, very similar things with Huberdeau and Sutter. And I think here's what I know for sure. Especially if they end up missing the playoffs here, which is the most likely scenario, if they end up missing the playoffs, this has got to get fixed. And it either gets fixed by the human beings that are involved and they just work it out and put themselves in a better spot for next year, or a subtraction's got to be made, and whether that's making a change at head coach or making a personnel change, I just know for sure that you cannot have this headbutting and this type of disjointedness going into next season, because yes, this season's important, but they made these moves and they set the direction of the team for more than just 1 year. They gave themselves kind of a finite window to be a really competitive team. And it's more than just this 1 year, but you probably don't want to waste any more than 1 year when your window's so finite.
Pat Steinberg joining us from Calgary with Sportsnet 960. Pat, before we go, I'd imagine in some ways a season-defining homestand coming up with games against Vegas, San Jose, LA, to see whether they can stay in this hunt. You mentioned goaltending's been a big, big issue. They went away from Markstrom, who's had a number of starts, to Dan Vladar last night. How, just comments on the homestand itself, but also how you think the goaltending might go, at least when they take on Vegas tomorrow night.
Well, I mean, it's a big homestand for sure. And after this homestand, they don't have a lot left in terms of like really high quality opponents. They've got Nashville and Winnipeg, and the rest are kind of teams that are on the outside.
Jets are the only playoff team in the final 7 games.
Exactly. And the way the Flames have played against non-playoff teams, that's got people somewhat apprehensive about Calgary's chances. But yes, this is a pretty important homestand. And if you can pick up some points here, you can put yourself in a spot where at the very least you're in decent shape to keep things interesting. But, you know, the goaltending situation, they made a really interesting choice, because kind of in the second, third quarters of the season, it was an open competition, I think. Jacob has struggled for the most part all year. Dan Vladar for quite some time was the better guy, and so they kind of gave him the opportunity coming out of the All-Star break specifically and said, okay, this thing's open, Dan. If you can take it right now, you've got a chance to get on a roll, and maybe you'll be our guy for the rest of the year. He didn't. He faltered his first time ever being in that spot. I don't even really think you can blame him all that much for it, but he faltered. And then as the final quarter of the season started, Dan Vladar started against the Boston Bruins at home on February 28th, allowed 2 goals on 4 shots, got pulled after 20, and Jacob Markstrom then kind of became the guy. And after that game, Daryl Sutter said, we need Marky to get hot. We need Jacob to be our guy. And Jacob has responded to that and went on a string of 8 straight starts where he looked like a bona fide number one goalie. Bad goals weren't going in. He was making key stops. He stole a game for the Flames without question on the road in Minnesota, where they had no business getting 1, let alone 2 points. And Jacob Markstrom was probably the first, second, and third star on that night. And so you're like, okay, maybe Jacob's back. And then against Dallas on Saturday and LA on Monday, he looked tired. He was kicking out rebounds like we haven't seen for the last little while. Some softer goals going in on him, and he allowed 12 goals in 5 periods, got pulled, and Vladar's played the last 4. I still think you stick with the same philosophy in that you've said that you need Jacob to get hot. You've said you need him to be the guy, so let him roll and put him back in against Vegas. You gave him his rest against Anaheim. Vladar got the win, so go to Markstrom against Vegas, and probably for the most part in their final 10, you play him for 8 or 9 of the final 10. That's the way that I think they're going to do it. And personally, knowing what I've seen from Jacob, last 2 games notwithstanding, that's probably the way I would go as well.
Well, Pat, 2 weeks today, Flames at Winnipeg here in the Peg. It, in all likelihood, will be a massive game. We'll have to catch up in and around that time as well. Great to have you back on the program, man. Hope you and the fellas are well back at the old station, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yep, absolutely, Huss. Be well, buddy. Good to see you.
Thanks so much for doing this. There is the man, Pat Steinberg. Give him a follow on Twitter. He is the guy for all things Flames. And as I mentioned, I think yesterday on the program, listening to the postgame after that 8-2 loss, it really did for a minute make me miss 1290 and the postgame callers, especially postgame callers after an 8-2 loss for the home team. Great stuff with our guy, Pat. All right, we've got some really good stuff from Bones, I hear. We'll play for that for you in just a second. Gang, a week today, sports trivia with Winnipeg Sports Talk at Little Brown Jug down on the Exchange on William Avenue. If you were at our first event, it was a big hit, and we cannot wait to do it again. Count yourself in. Don't wait to get tickets because we do have limited space. There is a link in the description of this show today. You can also check out my Twitter at Hustlerama or Little Brown Jug or Sports Talk WPG. Click on that Eventbrite link, grab your seats, and we'll see you there for what should be a hell of a fun night a week from today. And speaking of Little Brown Jug, we'll be able to try the new generic lager, which just launched. Basic lager, just better, impressively standard in the best way, light and clean to taste with a mellow flavor and crisp finish. Now Manitoba can support local without having to move away from the domestic taste they've come to expect with light beer. It's available in 8-packs or by the can through the tap room and through vendors. And the 8-packs in liquor marts will be available by single cans starting in June. Next Wednesday, looking forward to seeing as many of you out as possible for a big WST get-together and some brain-busting sports trivia questions from yours truly at Little Brown Jug. And just before we get to the Bones clips, a huge thanks to our friends at the Nick and Nicky DQ group. We're just about out of the winter weather, and it's an even better time to go jump on a blizzard and get that feeling of spring and summer. New flavors all the time. And while you're there, make sure to check out those amazing DQ stack burgers and my personal favorite, the honey barbecue chicken fingers. 4 locations for Nick and Nicky DQ: DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's. Pop by, tell them the boys at Winnipeg Sports Talk sent you. And if you do need a DQ ice cream or blizzard cake for an upcoming event, you can hit them up on Instagram and they'll let them know what you want for a custom cake for a quick and easy pickup at any of the 4 Nick and Nicky DQs. All right, let's get Remo back in here. We're going to hear from Rick Bones in a minute. Had to laugh at a few of the comments in chat, Reem. I do remember, in the past couple of years when the Oilers have been struggling and the Jets were struggling, I would go on Dusty's show in Edmonton, or he'd come on here, and it was sort of like the misery loves company session. And that's sort of what it sounded like with the issues that the Flames have been having right now, and their very precarious predicament right now with 10 games left in the season.
Yeah, no one even commented. What is this Flames lunch? In chat?
They were enjoying it too much.
They were enjoying it too much, and I've been enjoying it as well because it does seem like a lot of the stuff we're saying about the Jets, they're saying about the Flames, but just more. And just one thing on trivia night, I put a link on. I finally just did this. I put a link on WinnipegSportsTalk.com at the top. Trivia night at LBJ.
Oh,
so
perfect.
I don't know why it took me so long to do that. Anyways, but yeah, the Flames. I mean, it's so entertaining. What's been happening here? I saw a comment in chat that said we should be positive about the Jets. They're in a playoff spot. This is what coming into the season you would be happy, but it's just the way they've got there. We're just so puzzled by it. How you can for 2 months of the season be fighting for top spot and then look like a completely different team for 2 months. And that was before we get to the Bones clips, that was pretty much what Rennie and Scott Billick were asking Rick Bowness today after the skate. So and the Flames seem to be going through a similar thing. You brought in all these offseason pieces. You thought it was going to gel, and it really hasn't. So it seems like something is going to come to a head, as Pat said, at the end of the season.
Well, I mean, this is what it comes down to me. I mean, you're exactly right. Any commenters have told me. I mean, if you had told me at the beginning of the season that going into the final 10 games of the year, the Jets would be in a playoff spot, and they'd have 4 points on Calgary and 5 on Nashville, despite the games in hand, I would have taken it in a heartbeat. But if you'd told me that on January 17th, when the team was in first place in the West, I would have said, well, what the hell's happening for the next 2 months? That's where we are right now. And listen, there still is time to get this together, but to make the playoffs, and I think that's the only thing I'm concerned about with right now, as I think most fans are, is getting in. But I mean, even if you get in, I mean, unless this team finds its way, it could be a very quick and embarrassing trip to the playoffs, because the teams at the top of the West right now are gearing up, ready for this postseason tournament. And we haven't seen a lot of postseason readiness as of late from the Winnipeg Jets. But let's hear what the coach had to say. They practiced today before getting on the bird out to begin this West Coast trip. Tomorrow, late game against the Anaheim Ducks. And Bones talked about his team trying to find their game and first of all, book their ticket to the postseason.
Well, the most important thing is to get in. And the most important, and just as important, I should say, is playing the right way at the right time. So it's both. Last night's a perfect example. We had 2 great periods and a bad period. So we win the game, but you better be honest about how you played it. So we're not going to walk away saying, oh, wow, 2 win, that's it, that's great. That's not what we're doing. Yeah, we won the game. We needed the win. We got it. That's the best news. But we have to play a lot better for 60 minutes than we did last night. We've beaten some pretty good teams here lately by playing the right way. And when there's times we seem like we're right back on track, like 2 periods last night, and then the second period we just go back to careless habits. So we do whatever we have to do to win these games right now. At the same time, being honest on our appraisal of how we played the game, and continue to work on and address the areas that are of concern.
All right, so there's Rick Bowness, and it was kind of funny. He basically said exactly what I said at the start of the game, at the start of this show. I mean, great to get those 2 points, but you also have to be honest about what happened and what needs to be the case going forward for the club. Here's another clip from Bones on just trying to explain the Jekyll and Hyde look of his team last night.
Every team has its own personalities, different characteristics of the players themselves. So we've gotten to know this group over the course of training camp, and they're up to this point. So you can't really compare one team to the next because of the different characters and the different capabilities of the player and how they play the game. So this is the group we have. Our job is to make, and they do know what we look like and how we're supposed to play. Now the commitment to do that for 60 minutes has to come from them. So if we're sitting there patting them on the back after the second period, we're wrong. Coaches are wrong. So we address it, and what we always do is we move on. And yeah.
Interesting, Rick's choice of words. And I don't know whether I'm reading into this more than is necessary, but talking about the personalities in the room as well as on the team, and how that how that is part of the makeup of this hockey club right now with 10 games left in the season. Bowness did talk about the players receiving an honest assessment of their game.
It would be, I guess, your job to keep the players honest, but where do you think they are at it, taking that honest assessment?
Well, they should be used to it by now. We've been doing it all year. We take an honest assessment on every game, win or lose. Sometimes you win, you play poorly, you have to address it, and sometimes you play great and lose. We've been honest with our assessment of how we played every game. So they should be used to it by now.
Do you find the players are usually honest with themselves, though, or do you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And I've said this before. The players know when we're playing what we look like, who we are. They know that. It's a matter, so that's why the honest assessment of how we're playing comes into play. Is that what we look like? Is that second period? Is that who we are? Is that what we look like when we're playing well? There's not a chance. Take the first and the third. Is that who we are? And that's how we play? Yeah, it is. Created more offense that way. Yeah.
All right, so there's Rick Bowness, some good stuff and good questions from Rennie. Scott Billick of the Winnipeg Sun was there, and here's a question from Billick and an answer from Bones on whether they need more commitment from their top dogs.
I've got to get more out of them, put it that way.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting, though. Like, I mean, players, I mean, a coach only can do so much. I mean, you need the players to come to the rink and motivate themselves and have that commitment themselves. Like, so what do you need to do that's different than...
Who motivates you when you wake up in the morning?
Myself.
There you go.
Right. So why do you say then
that's
you need to do more to motivate those guys?
That's what we're dealing with. So that's part of our job, is to stay on top of them and keep pushing them. And don't let them get into a comfort zone, and don't let them back off. And sometimes you're doing that, you're not even aware of you're doing it. So it has to be shown, it has to be talked to, it has to be addressed. So we'll keep pushing, and then the rest is on them. Yes. If we were allowing this and just not addressing it, that they can do more, then that's one thing. But we are addressing it, and now that next step, that's your point. That has to come from them. Yes.
That was a fascinating back and forth between Scott and Rick. And I will say this, Reem, the way that Bones handled that, I spoke with a former coach at one point and, just off the record, was talking about the job. And I said, give me the goods. What percentage of your team, of your job, is X's and O's and scouting? And what part of your job is basically being a psychologist? And they said probably more to the latter. And it seems like this sports psychology job for Rick Bowness is maybe the biggest challenge of all of them. Here's a follow-up from Billick on that, asking about why they would need more motivation considering where they're at.
It just seems a little odd that some of these guys have been in the league for 6, 7, 8 years, and you're having to try in game 71, 72 to get them to motivate themselves.
Yep. That's what we're dealing with.
Fair enough.
Wow. That I don't even know what to say to that one, Reem. I mean, that is, I've loved Bones' frankness and his honesty. But I mean, that's, I don't want to say necessarily that's a complete shot across the bow of some of his players because of, Scott obviously was answering the question and Bones seemed to answer it honestly. But I mean, that says a lot about the state of this team right now going into the final 10 games of the year. That's what we're dealing with. I mean, wow.
I've been muted there. It's crazy. The last 2 months, he's been raising his arms like this, giving a shrug, like Jim Halper at the office looking at the camera. I was like, I don't know, guys. And he says that's what we're dealing with there. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I don't know, crazy, but just hearing talk about motivation there. So. It was a great follow-up there by Scott.
Yeah, and I mean some really. I mean, listen, I'm kind of echoing what people are saying in the chat. Phyllis, wow, just wow. It's your boy Bruce. Quote: "That's what we're dealing with." Rolo, oh my God, did Bones just say that? A couple more wows, and a few more wows actually. It was well that's a real challenge, an indirect challenge to his players. But I mean, how much will challenging them now change anything when? I think this challenge has been put forth in a number of different ways by the coaching staff. And even if it wasn't, I mean, just the situation the team is in right now, you would think would bring that out of the team. That was a little bit more on the collective psyche of the club right now and the challenges at hand for the coaching staff. There was a bunch of other things that needed to happen today at practice, and that, of course, is trying to figure out a way to spark this putrid power play right now that's really hurting the Winnipeg Jets. Bones discussed trying to get a little bit of momentum with the man advantage.
Well, if you're creating momentum, eventually that puck will go in. But you got to create that momentum to make that happen. And there was a couple of really good power plays last night, and there's a couple of terrible power plays that we simply got outworked. So that's what you have to address. You can go out there and have a good power play, get some chances. Oh, yeah, it doesn't go in, but don't get outworked by four guys. And that happened a couple times last night. And then when their power play was dialed in, they had some really good looks. So that's, again, that goes back to the inconsistencies of where we are right now.
All right, so there's Bones on the power play. A big part of the power play is, first of all, getting it into the zone. Here's a quick clip from Bones on practicing zone entries, which have been somewhat problematic for the Jets for a while.
Well, if you're creating momentum, eventually that puck will
No,
go
that's
in.
not it. My mouse is just sticking today, sir. I'm going to have to do some edits on the podcast.
Look, that's on them. So we can get them in. We can give them the next. Okay, once you're in, this is what we need you to do next, and where the puck needs to go, so we can maintain possession. But when they get in and then throw it away, there's nothing we can do about that. That's just a terrible decision on the player.
All right, so Bones talking a little bit more about some of the power play issues. We will finish this up with a positive, and of course, anyone that watched that game last night knew that the big positive was the backbone of this team, Connor Hellebuyck, stepping up when his team absolutely needed it. I thought it was a great choice. The situation determined that they needed Connor Hellebuyck in the net, and he paid off his coach with a brilliant performance that helped his team get a vital 2 points in the standings. I've kind of thought that this is going to be Helly for the next little while until things have sort of settled on where the Winnipeg Jets are going into the playoffs. But here's Bones on riding Hellebuyck as the team hits the road.
I think everyone in this league at this point is in the position where is going to go to their number one guy. It's up to us to give him the days off like we did today and rest and monitor that very, very closely. And if there's a game that we feel he's okay, you know what, he's a little tired, then we'd make that decision. We haven't seen that yet. And when we see that, then we'll have to address it. But I think we've done a really good job of giving him the time off so that he is rested. And so then that he feels fresh when he's going into the games. Now, if we had made him practice today, that would have been a big mistake. Right now, he's got to play tomorrow. So we're giving him the time off that he needs. And he knows what he needs better than anybody, and he would come to tell us exactly how he feels. If he wasn't ready to play, he'd let us know. But by working with him to give him the proper rest, then we're doing the best we can to control the situation.
All right, so there's Bones on the Hellebuyck situation going forward. And I'll tell you what, Remo, considering how crucial this situation is for the Winnipeg Jets, that was music to my ears. Helly, get out there. You're playing, and if you need some time off, don't worry about the morning skate. Don't worry about practice. Here's the schedule. These are the 10 nights we need you next.
I couldn't help but think, though, when he said, he'll tell us if he needs rest, of Grady Little going to get the ball from Pedro Martinez. What game was that? In the 0-3 ALCS against the Yankees? The one they didn't win, and he gave up the home run. I just think, he's not going to ever say, I need a rest, and I think they're going to have to pick and choose. I thought about them starting Rittich on Saturday, because the Kings have been the best team in the league since beginning of February. Maybe you say that's, afternoon game. It's the closest thing to a back-to-back. Maybe they just go with Rittich there and save Hellebuyck for Ducks, Sharks. and Red Wings. But that would be a long time between games for Hellebuyck because you have the 2 days off.
Yeah.
You have the 2 days off, so maybe they just give her here. I don't know.
Give her 37. Put here are the lineup cards for the next 8 games at least. 37 starting goaltender. Go from there, and he certainly rewarded them with that decision last night with the game that he played. Great stuff, cutting those clips. That was. We'll be definitely talking about those more.
Yeah,
play that one more time. Play that one more time. That's what we're dealing with.
Here's the Billick follow-up. Okay, here we are.
Maybe it just seems a little odd that some of these guys have been in the league for 6, 7, 8 years, and you're having to try in game 71, 72 to get them to motivate themselves.
Yeah. That's what we're dealing with.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
Yeah, wow, that was a good one. So we'll have to see. I mean, it says that's what they're dealing with.
Yeah, well, hey, shout out to Billick and Rennie for doing a great job down at the scrum today. And I have a feeling we'll be seeing and hearing that clip a few more times, maybe on That's Hockey or Sports Center a little bit later on today. All right, hey, let's get over to the Coolbet lines today. Very, very light night in the National Hockey League. Pittsburgh and Colorado going at it in Denver. Pittsburgh, after losing that game to Ottawa earlier this week, absolutely needs 2 points, and they got a very tough place to get it going up against the defending Stanley Cup champs. The Avalanche are a minus 157 favorite. Penguins plus 133 on the money line. And the Coyotes are back at it tonight in Edmonton to take on the Oilers. Oilers minus 476 favorites, and the Coyotes plus 370. Women's Worlds right now, they do have some live betting right now, but we can tell you that Korea and Canada right now are going into the 9th end. Canada with the hammer, down 5-4. Italy and Switzerland playing into the 8th. It's Switzerland up 3-2 on the Italians. Carrying the girls 5-3 right now, looking to get to 6-3 if they can beat the Koreans this afternoon. And I won't get into all of the results, but I can tell you that Corey Connors has won today, his first match at the World Match Play event on the PGA Tour. This starting today because, of course, it's matches Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then they get down to the final 16 and play it on the weekend. All the matches up right now over at Coolbet, and you can always use the promo code WST if you haven't played a Coolbet before for a 100% bonus on your first deposit up to $200. All right, Remo, before we go today, we've spent a lot of time talking about the Jets, obviously. I definitely wanted to get your take on, I know we mentioned this with Brandon a little earlier, but the scene last night, WBC final, Ohtani, Trout, a strikeout, 100-mile-an-hour gas to win it for Japan, and just the entire success of that overall event.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible scene. The Japanese play-by-play calls of it have been amazing. And
so good.
And this is what you wanted, the two best players. And it is so amazing that the Angels have these two guys and have been absolutely terrible last,
75 and 87. Book it.
Yeah, the last 10 years. So that's what you wanted. And credit to Japan. And yeah, WBC, I think, because of the success this year, you see, the fans going crazy and the players celebrating, like Trey Turner hitting another big home run. I think maybe you get more commitment from players coming up because they want to be a part of this. I think there'll be more excitement in the next one. And, it's taken a while. This is, they've done it since 2007-ish was the first one. But you have this USA-Japan rivalry, and it's so awesome. And it is, I said it, I think, beginning of the week. I tweeted out, my takeaway is hockey, they've messed up by not having this, by not having a generation. And I think they also messed up in the 2016, and I said it at the time, having this under 23 team. If you want to have a successful tournament, you need, for hockey, Team USA to be good.
Best on best.
And ice their best team.
On best.
And because they had Team North America, USA was not able to ice their best team. Matthews, Eichel, I think Seth Jones, Hellebuyck, Gibson, they were all on Team North America. So USA went 0-3, and no one cared. And here Canada won, and it was...
I'll be honest, I didn't care that much about the Canadian team as well. It just wasn't It wasn't a true best-on-best tournament. I mean, for the Jet, listen, I remember watching it as a Jets fan, and you had Scheifele and you had Hellebuck, on the Team North America, sort of in it for those guys. But, no one gives a damn if the young stars of the event win it. It's about who's better, who has a better national team. Canada, United States, the other clubs as well. And we have been deprived of that now for the better part of the last dozen years. It is so overdue. And the only thing I can hope, and Brandon said this earlier, is that the success of this event wakes people up in the NHL offices, the NHLPA, and they freaking figure it out, because the sport is losing, the fans are losing right now, and the sooner the better we can get back to a true best-on-best tournament will be great for everybody involved, especially the National Hockey League.
Yeah, I agree. Gets a lot of I just remember the interest when TJ Oshie scored all those shootout goals against Russia in Sochi. Like, they haven't replicated that since. And again, you see USA, the excitement, the sold out stadiums, the ratings on TV, throughout the, Japan and here. You haven't had a big event like this in a while. And that was the biggest baseball games ever yesterday. And, a lot of people are calling it an exhibition coming in. I don't think we're going to be saying that going forward. When you see the excitement, and, for me, I just remember, 2014 in Sochi, Canada winning and really showing no emotion after winning that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I need to go watch the replay, but I remember the post game, like, they could not have been less excited. Maybe I'm wrong. And I think that was, I don't know what it was, but yeah, the 2016, I really didn't care like I had, maybe because I was older, but also because you didn't take it seriously because wasn't best on best.
No, you're right. Thinking about 2014, my takeaway from that is that they allowed the bars to open at 5 a.m. so everyone could go and watch the gold medal game. By the time it was done, the sun was up. It was a great thing for fans, but that team was like a boa constrictor. It just absolutely suffocated and strangled the Swedes in that game. But you're right. There was so much pressure on that team. I think you nailed it there, Remo. You didn't see a lot of that great joy. It was almost more relief that they went out and clinically and systematically dismantled their opponents. But listen, we need McDavid. We need, Nate McKinnon and, these top players being able to lead Canada in an event. And hopefully that happens sometime soon.
Just going on that, I see a comment from BA Split who says, didn't they cancel the World Cup because of the Russia situation? And now IIHF saying Russia's not going to be, and Russia and Belarus aren't going to be in the Worlds or World Juniors this year because of security concerns. And if that's it, just do it without Russia then. No worries. Just do it without them.
Go you have invade a bunch of countries. You're not invited to the Worlds or whatever. Would it be better with the Russians in it? Sure. But it would still be phenomenal if you've got the Swedes, the Finns, the Czechs, the Slovaks, the Americans, of course, the Canadians. And there are other teams now, like the Swiss. Yeah. That, can put together legitimate teams. We won't have Team Europe where Paul Maurice is coaching, a mishmash of a bunch of guys from odd countries. All in all, I think everyone's in agreement on that. And I am really hoping that this is something that comes out of the success of the World Baseball Classic. We don't have the ratings yet, but it was expected that last night's game between the USA and Japan could and likely will be the most watched baseball game of all time. And hey, just quickly, one more baseball note. Goldeyes released their promotional schedule. We are real excited to get going and do some fun stuff with the Fish and Winnipeg Sports Talk listeners this year. And our guy, Reem, the legend himself, one of my favorite guys to interview ever, Reggie Abercrombie, will have his number, I believe his number 11 retired by the club. It's going to be on August 11th. I actually think that we might be involved in the festivities for Reggie. So congratulations to him. And that will be a real highlight of the upcoming Goldeyes season as soon as this damn snow gets out of here.
Yeah, we can start looking forward to that. They're going to have a Reggie bobblehead to the first 1,000 fans in attendance. What is it? He's a club leader, career homers, RBIs, runs. He's the American Association all-time leader.
Everything.
Hits, home runs, RBIs, runs. Part of championship teams, great guy. So I'm pumped for that. That sounds Old Eyes legend. It'll be great to see him up there with Donnie Smith, Brian Duva, and Ace Walker up there. Is that it?
Max Poulin.
Max Poulin, thank you.
Brian, did you say Brian Duva?
I said Duva, yeah. That's a nice wall. That's a nice wall. There's some great players.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anyways, baseball season just around the corner. We'll talk some Jays coming up in the next couple of weeks as well. And, of course, the Fish coming up. But tomorrow, going to be all about this Jets road trip. Dennis Bernstein will join us from SoCal ahead of these games against the Ducks and the Kings. Murat Atesh, I believe, is down in L.A. He's going to join us as well. Really looking forward to getting Murat's takes on what we just heard from Rick Bowness. Count on us talking about that. And we will, again, have a little bit more from the guys, Billick and Ken, on Friday. Hacksaw, who's also down in SoCal. I'm sure he'll be watching that Ducks-Jets game. So it's going to be a big show tomorrow. Make sure you join us live at 1 p.m. if you're able to. Hit that red subscribe button, folks. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And don't forget, for you folks that have found us or watch normally on YouTube, hit your favorite podcast feed and put in Winnipeg Sports Talk and subscribe to the podcast. So when you're not able to catch us with video on YouTube, you can always fire us up in the car or wherever you're at on your favorite podcast platform. Great show today. The folks in the chat brought it. Remo, you brought it. Great guest today with Pat Steinberg. Awesome conversation with Frankie Corrado. We'll probably post that separately on the chat tomorrow. And, of course, our guy, Brandon Rewucki. Folks, have a great night tonight. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow for a game day edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk before the Jets take on the Ducks and begin a big 3-game road trip as the push to the playoffs continues in the Central Division and the Western Conference. For Michael Remis, I'm Andrew Paterson. Have a great one. We'll catch you tomorrow on WST.
Oh my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.